I see some remarkable changes. I see a whole change in the spirit of the church over these last few months with this business on worldliness and the mental realm. As I've said before, according to the Word of God, we have a responsibility to maintain and improve ourselves mentally. God didn't just say, well, I've made you, you can live the way you want to live. We're a slave of His now. And even if we weren't, He made us in His image as a human being. And there is a privilege of being a human and not a rock, and with privileges come responsibilities. He doesn't give us the right. We don't have the right just to do whatever we want, live how we want in life. He says discipline yourself, spiritually, mentally, physically, in all areas. Discipline yourself. That's a hard charge for a lot of people. The cry of my heart is that we won't have some of you people here in the church kind of known for being the studious type, more thoughtful, more disciplined, and others not. The cry of my heart is that we'll all see the importance of this, that we'll all jump into it together. We got to see a little bit of where everyone is, and I didn't intend it to be this way, and I don't mean anything critical by it. I'm just speaking reality, facts to help you. Where everyone was with some of the theology quizzes that I gave you. So what if you don't know what's going on? You don't know what the question, or are you trying to interact? Is there anything there? Is there an interest, a spark in you? See, one thing that most teachers don't have, because they're out there, in the secular world, people go to school because they have to, not because they want to. It's a rare time when you can get students who are there because they want to be there, who love to learn. That's a dream. And why do teachers favor certain pupils? I happened to always be one of the favored ones in my classes because they knew I was there to learn. I love to learn. Well, that makes a teacher's job worthwhile then. But see, we shouldn't have any favored pupils. We should have the ideal of everyone in this together. That is an idea. That is a dream. But see, we're not like the secular world out there. They go to school to get a degree, to get a job. They can go or not go. We don't have the option of learning or not learning, of thinking or not thinking. I hope that as we go through this, you'll pick up more and more how to be a thinking Christian is an absolute command of God to us. I mean, that is part of the whole creation story. He didn't make us rational just for no reason at all. God didn't make us rational just so we can build a better automobile. Surely there's something else to our rationality than being able to produce products out there in the world. You can make robots who can make other robots, right? There's something else to our rationality beyond being able to put two boards together. There's something that's more basic, that's deeper, that's longer lasting. You're not going to be building cars in heaven. But I'm sure you're never going to lose your rationality there, though. We have rationality that the rest of creation doesn't possess. We have self-rationality. They're not aware of themselves. They're aware of danger, intruders into the mother wolf's den or something. We're aware of others too. We're aware of ourselves. We have self-consciousness. Trees, rocks, animals, they don't have. The animal doesn't sit down there and think, all right, I'm going to think about myself today. How have I been feeling recently? I remember a long time ago when this happened to me and it made my heart so sad. Animals can't think that way, let alone rocks and trees and planets. We have self-consciousness. And we do have the ability to be immediately conscious of God. I wouldn't go so far as to say the animals don't have some consciousness of that, but it's nothing like what we have, that's for sure. I don't know that anyone can prove the other realm anyway, but I would tend to think there's something to animals that's deeper than just the biologists realize. An animal is more than just matter put together. There's something there, there's life, there's soul. There's something there that's different than what just the biologist could come to with all of his analysis in the laboratory. But I'll say again what I said a moment ago. I think that many people have a hidden fear of embracing the disciplined, thoughtful life. Don't let that be true of you. Don't live your life vicariously through me or through someone else. Don't look at me as some unique specimen of humanity. There have been many people down through the ages. Some of the greats were Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, who said life isn't worth living if we don't think about it. The unexamined life is not worth living. Now, granted, you find very few people who will think that way. They have many excuses. Today, I guess the number one excuse is we're too busy. But people have always been busy. Come on, I mean, all the conveniences we have today, what do you think people did in the olden days without all those conveniences? They were very busy people. We'll get into that later in Christian ethics as well. But we have founded a whole school of thought right here. You go back and listen to that first tape in Old Testament introduction. I heard that the other day. And I was a little embarrassed because I sound like a drill sergeant on that thing. And you know, it never entered my mind. I'm sounding the same way this morning, you see. But this is after 7 years of work. It never entered my mind. When I say I'm embarrassed that I didn't even think about it. It never entered my mind that in all that I was saying that day I gave that message, any of you would be responding negatively to that. I just thought, I mean, this is obvious. All human beings do this. I was saying about get your pencils out and your papers and bring your rulers and underline and memorize and I'm sure some of you were just like, who is this guy up here? What did we get ourselves into? Surely that was the response of some of you, but that never entered my mind then. I'm sure someone thought, what did we get ourselves into? This guy is just rattling on and on. He's trying to force me to do these things. Now we're a long way removed from that. But what I'm saying in saying that is we founded a whole school here. You have come a long way since those first days there. You're first introduced to this whole realm. We're developing it more and more and more. We're not saying other people haven't desired to think like we have. Many people have. Proportionally, they were minuscule. But various groups have desired to get together and think. But we think we've got something different here, though. We've got bits and pieces of other people and other movements and other thoughts, but we don't know of another group that's just like our group here. With the characteristics we have, the honesty, the desire to study, the desire to approach other views, and then if we decide not to accept them, then to be able to refute them logically. We don't know other groups like that. And then who stay with what we feel to be all the truths of Scripture. We know many people who refute opponents' views logically, but they'll refute the Bible, though. We don't find people who will adopt and who will embrace all of those things that are taught in the Word of God. It just seems like one almost doesn't go with the other. As soon as you get someone who gets higher education, who starts learning and thinking more, what happens? But they end up living in Germany as a higher critic. And if you can keep people away from education, keep people simple, then they'll never surrender things like the atonement and the virgin birth. See how that's almost true. As soon as you give someone some education and some ability, they almost turn on the Word of God and become a liberal or a modernist. And that's why I think that anti-intellectualism runs so strongly under the current in America, especially in American religion, is we've seen what intellectualism has done. We've seen what higher education has done to so many scholars. It's turned them into higher critics born in Germany. And the people who still believe the Bible are basically the dumb, the simple, the naive, the ignorant in the pews out there. But that shouldn't, in other words, those shouldn't be the characteristics of Bible believers. Dumb, ignorant, foolish, superstitious. Those shouldn't be characteristics. What should characterize them, the chief characteristic is they are a lover of precision, of logic, of rationale, because that's exactly what God is. There's nothing illogical or imprecise about Him. That's exactly what He is. It's illogical not to believe in God. What we started now about 7 years ago, this fall, we've been in it 7 years now. You ought to turn over a new leaf, as it were, remembering all that you've done thus far, all the study that you put into it, and somehow recognize finally how crucial all of this is. It will forever get one out of the superstitious, ignorant boat that a lot of people are in. And I'm not just saying this to have another message. That is one of the chief areas of world deniers. People who are superstitious and ignorant. They don't know in other words, they don't know any better but to reject the world. They don't know anything about it. They don't know anything but to reject the world. That's not enough. We should know more than just let's reject the world. We should know more than that. So we think that we're different. We are unique. And if you ever surrender your uniqueness, your exactness, your precision, your narrowness, if you ever surrender your uniqueness through the arguments of false rationalism, you will fall into the abyss of mediocrity. Many people today, to borrow a title of a book, are addicted to mediocrity. You know what mediocrity is? It means mediocre. That's a Latin word that literally means halfway up the mountain. You know what some synonyms of a mediocre? They are dull, boring, unexciting. They've lost the zip and the zest in their walk and in their life. As soon as a person surrenders their uniqueness, our uniqueness, what we have here, that's exactly what will happen. You'll become addicted to mediocrity. And most people around, Frankie Schaeffer has a book entitled that, Addicted to Mediocrity. People are addicted to the dull, to the boring, the non-impressive, the unexciting. It's like watching grass grow or a cat nap or a bored weather. What a dull existence. To think that a good vacation is watching a bored weather or grass grow or a cat nap. That's their life there. They are the most mediocre people around. That's what happens when you surrender your uniqueness. So we want never to surrender our uniqueness. The Bible doesn't give us examples to follow of mediocrity. Jesus certainly didn't give us a mediocre example to follow. In my zeal for learning and for knowledge and for study, I don't think that you could charge me of ever giving you an example of mediocrity. We should strive for excellence. We are not enough. I'm thinking of all of us here on the cutting edge of theological and philosophical excellence as we should be. I'll say that again. We are not all on the cutting edge of theological and philosophical thought as we should be. Nothing better to me than a good, lustful, hardy, philosophical or theological argument. I spent thousands of dollars and left my family to go sit in seminary classrooms and get that. That was fun. Listen to those meaty arguments. I just could hardly wait to get to class in the morning and hear this argument, this point set forth, and this counter proposal over here, and the arguments and the discussions, and then the final conclusion after the whole matter. That's more exciting than a cockfight or a bullfight to me, because that's what life is all about. You're going to stand or fall on what your beliefs are. Jesus equates salvation in John 17:3 with what? That they might know thee, the only true God, in Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. This is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, in Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. I just got a boiling heart for philosophical, theological debate. Sometimes I feel like when I come in here, Paul coming into the synagogues, disputing and reasoning with the Jews and with the Greeks. But I'm often doing it on a one-way street, dialogue at a distance. I bring various proposals and views, and it's as though you're listening as a silent, hidden audience on the other side of a closed curtain to me fight it out between these various views here. You should get involved. Think, wrestle, stretch, believe for yourself. There's just no way, I've seen it from my own life, there's no way you'll ever be grounded in anything until you have thought it out, stretched about the matter, wrestled with it, till you've chosen what to believe yourself. One brother was saying to me, we were talking Friday night, he said, whenever some of these things got started in the church here last year, a year or so ago, year and a half ago, so what I found happening in my life was I had the rug pulled out from underneath me, which showed me to be as I really was, I didn't have any beliefs. I didn't know anything about anything. And I told him, I said, well, that was one thing I was coming to realize about a year and a half or 2 years ago, that we have just clones in the church, that we don't have a healthy, wholesome thinking environment that we should have. We don't have that. And so if we just start suggesting various things and looking at this area, then here's what's going to happen. People who want to remain clones to earlier thoughts, they're going to leave then. They won't even listen to any alternative. They won't even think about the matter. They'll leave. And then what will happen with the rest, it'll probably prove to them that they hadn't been thinking people, and so we'll start all over again. And isn't that a pretty good description of kind of what happened? And that's what I thought about it. We don't think enough around here. People just come to church, they sit and they take notes, and then they head out to work the rest of the week. They still have not somehow grasped yet that your whole life is not because it's my view, it was Plato's view, it's a Christian, non-Christian view, anyone's view who chooses to think about life, who chooses to see that as maybe the most important calling that we have. These people didn't want to take the time to go through thoughts about things. Just satisfied with superstitions and with ignorance. See, I'm not satisfied with that. I haven't been for several years now. I won't ever be again satisfied with superstition or ignorance. I'm not satisfied with someone, but I believe this because someone said this about a certain verse. That doesn't satisfy me. I've seen too many times in my life in the past where I've been wrong about something because I was so dumb that I wouldn't take a step forward myself. And so what do we say about ignorance? Don't make the same mistake twice. Learn from it. I guess most people, leaders, are afraid to ever present this matter the way I'm presenting it, especially Christians, because they're afraid that you might come up with different positions than they will have. And then you'll have a whole fight in the church. But see, that's not exactly what I think. I think that if we all think, if we're all sincere, if we all meet the rules of the game, of being fair, hungry, honest, sincere, we'll come to the same conclusions then. See, I can't believe that for everyone out there in the world because I don't think they'll meet the rules of the game. See, if you want to play this game, you've got to play by the rules. It's like having a debate with someone. You often have heard debates, characterized as, two people fighting and no one wins. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to an official debate before where there's a moderator. Let's say a theological or philosophical debate. They're fascinating to watch. There are certain rules to the game. A lot depends on logic and rationale. Fairness is fairness. Truth is truth. Honesty is honesty. There's an audience. They had one down here at Liberty not long ago, Liberty Bible, that I've read some about. Of course, I wasn't there. But they would debate on a topic, and a moderator's there, and he picks who wins the debate. It's who can prove their case the strongest. See, debates aren't just, I wouldn't want to get in a debate with someone because I can't find people. Here's why. Because I can't find people who would agree to play by what I think the rules of the game are. If I could find someone, which I think you people are, who will play by the rules of the game, then I'm willing to discuss anything under the sun. You understand what I'm saying? I think we'll reach the same conclusion. If we meet the rules of the game, and rules are things like honesty and fairness, we've got to be careful of things like guilt by association. There's all types of rules of good logic and good debate, that if you will follow that, someone will win the debate and someone will lose. And you know what that shows? That truth is knowable and that truth is unique. There's not a second opinion that's equally true. It will show that something is right and something is wrong. Of course, if the moderator, he has various unchristian or non-logical, illogical views, then they might not play the game right, and he might choose the wrong person as the winner who actually has a false view. But that'd be a poor debate, though. Here's what I would say. Maybe you aren't qualified enough, perhaps I'm not qualified enough, but I would put whoever is qualified up against any atheist in the world and give us a fair moderator. Christianity will win always, hands down. See, that's something I believe. I believe that very strongly about the faith that I've embraced. I don't think this is something just for ignorant, naive people, that God made them embrace it, but it has no proof and actually all the evidence is to the contrary. I wouldn't follow Christianity. You think about that. Don't just agree with what I'm saying as a little neat saying. I wouldn't follow Christianity if all the evidence is to the contrary. You need to think about that yourself. That gives me security in my walk and my beliefs. I would not follow it if all the evidence is to the contrary. I follow it because it's provable. It is right. There is not another right way. And I think any fair, honest person will recognize that. Don't just accept what I've said because I've said it. You think about it on your own. Would you follow Christianity if all of the evidence was to the contrary? See, I know what people say, well, I would just take it by faith. Well, faith always is based on something. Faith always has to have a foundation, or it's not faith. It's just wishful thinking, just an opinion. Faith is based on a foundation. The better the foundation, the truer, the purer the faith will be. A couple of other thoughts I'll share with you before we close this morning. Talking still about the same subject of striving for excellence. You ever pace your floor with two sides of an argument, viciously pitting them against one another, and see who comes out the winner? I do that, have done that all the time. That's where I get a lot of my sermon material. I don't just read what someone else has to say and then either choose to believe it or not. Get the arguments going. Viciously pit them against one another. That's what I'm often doing up here. That's how I end up with a conclusion when I'm giving you 4 different views that the scholars have, which one I think is right. Pit them against each other. Let them fight to the death. Truth will always still be standing at the end of that fight. You can never kill truth. Not if you're an honest person. It'll always still be the one alive at the end. See, that's a certain part, a little segment, a large segment of my worldview. A lot of people don't even have that. They don't even agree with that. I think a lot of the fundamentalists out there would say, no, if you get truth in there and you can't ever tell what will happen because maybe error will come out of that debate or argument. But you see, what they're failing to note is we're talking about playing by the rules of the game. As long as you're playing by the rules of the game, this is a foolproof case that we have here then. Truth will always be standing. See, the problem is, here we're getting to it. We haven't studied enough. We don't know enough. We're not intelligent enough. We're not articulate enough to be able to clarify and defend our position. You say, now, do we have to be in order to have a position? Well, I'll be real frank with you. I would say yes. I would say that you're only going to have just kind of foggy, fuzzy notions about that until you can say, this is what I believe and this is why I believe it. Now, I don't think I've said anything more important this morning than that, because a lot of people will still go away with the fact, well, Brother Ross understands all of this. We don't quite understand it, but we still believe it. I don't think that's possible. You listen to what I'm saying. I don't think that's possible. For you to go away saying, I don't understand all of that, but I still believe it. You can say, I agree with Brother Ross, but you don't believe what he's teaching, though. Not if you don't know it yourself. Now, we didn't say you had to have a big vocabulary, but can you articulate what it is you believe? Church is in a sad mess. The church in the world out there today, they can't explain anything. Because of the development of Christian doctrine through the centuries, all they can say is, I believe in the virgin birth, I believe in the Trinity, I believe in, it's just the Apostles' Creed type of thing. That's not enough. That's the problem with creeds there. Creeds have a place, but they have problems. There's always an inherent problem with the creed. It may be doctrinally orthodox. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, right on through, go through the whole litany of the birth and death of Christ. But that produces the same thing as leapfrogging through the Bible looking for text, proof texting, produces the same type of mentality. They don't really know what the virgin birth is, they don't know about it, they don't know about the atonement, they don't know who God is, they don't know who Jesus is. I've said so many times that people in the church, they don't know who Jesus is, they're serving a different Jesus. That's why we differ with them over so many things. They've never taken the time to find out who he is. They would find out if they did. He rejects all of that baggage of institutional formula religion that they're following. He never established Lutheranism or all of the abominable denominations that you find. He never established all of that. They would find that if they studied. Who is Jesus? So I'm saying if a person is qualified, you could be put up against one who's equally qualified for their agnostic or atheistic position, and if you play by the rules of the game, then truth is always going to win. Maybe you would prefer Mr. C.S. Lewis to stand in for your side of the argument. He would be an excellent choice, because he did debate many times, and I don't think that he failed. He had such a sharp mind. You were not going to, and if he's got the truth, you see, you can be sharp but believe a false doctrine. If you're sharp and you've got the truth, you can't help but win. Not because you're anything, but because the truth will prevail. With others in the body, as you're with them, do you ever find yourself challenging what they say? I challenge that. What's your support for that? What's your rationale for that? This isn't the sword-stabbing syndrome of super spiritual persons that I've been critical of before. It's two robed, sandaled disciples, pupils of philosophy, who love life and who love wisdom, who can joyfully argue fiercely until the veil of darkness drops from one or the other of their eyes and they see the light. Because you haven't been brought up, again, this intellectual environment, here's something else that you probably would not know. Well, we can go back to Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, in his earlier days, he was a part of a reading philosophy club. And I guess it's sad to say, but only your intellectuals ever really do this. And what they do is they get together and they philosophize. I mean, that's what they do. They don't get together to play games or something. They get together to have tea and cake and then argue over philosophy and life and the soul and the triunity of God, and argue and fight over that, saying who's right and who's wrong. But in our society, you see, we've lost that. We've lost the study of the classics. We've lost the study of classical logic. There's a whole discipline that the ancients, the Greeks, used to know. Classical logic. We've lost that today. It's just every man for himself, believe what you want. Doesn't matter if it's contradictory. That's why we're living in such an inferior society today. We've lost a lot of what Westernism was known for and what it had to begin with. And a lot of it based on good thought. So I couldn't say based on Scripture. The Greeks were coming before the New Testament. They didn't read the Old. Say, well, how could they have ended up with so many things that were right? Well, they're men created in the image of God. That doesn't make them saved. That doesn't make all their doctrine orthodox, but they're men created in the image of God. So I don't know if we're enjoying, if we're getting into this area enough. I hear sometimes of people getting together and discussing this and discussing that, but I'll again give you my picture of it. Do you ever find yourself, when speaking with someone else, challenging them? And I don't mean in the sword-stabbing syndrome of super spirituality. No one, we can do without that. That's destructive to the body, to have that. But see, if you got, in other words, if you got two people who are walking, that's why I said two robed, sandaled disciples who are going to the same place, you got the same goal, then you want to know what the truth is. It's not someone trying to stab someone else. Well, I caught them and they didn't do this right and they didn't do that right. We can do without that garbage. That is nothing but garbage. That just produces friction and jealousy in the church. You know what I'm talking about with the sword-stabbing syndrome. But when two people who are honest and who love each other and who love life and wisdom equally get together and we're going to discuss this. I challenge you with that, brother. You can do it with a smile on your face. But I mean a fierce challenge. What's his response then? You're only either trying to help him or yourself, right? You're not trying to hurt anybody. What did I say? You're only trying to help either him, because he's wrong. You're going to prove that he's wrong. Or yourself. He's going to prove that you're wrong. How can we find fault with something like that? I enjoyed, I wanted much, much more than what we had at Lake George with those theological discussions. It's not weighty enough, heavy enough, deep enough. You can get into those things if you really will get into it and play by the rules of the game and just go for hours. Your soul is refreshed like you probably never experienced it before.
For the continuation of
Instead of just a typical person, he just rejects anything that he has already chosen not to believe. He rejects it. It's a shield of rejection goes up. That person could never be sympathetic with that view at all. They could never appreciate why someone has fallen into that view. See, I can appreciate why people who are liberals in theology are liberals. I can appreciate why Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in the deity of Christ. Where does he ever call himself God? Why didn't he just one time call himself God? They've noticed things like that. Well, I want to note the same thing. I'm going to have a different conclusion from the evidence of it. My evidence might be slightly different as well. But the liberals look out there. If God is so great and so big, someone was talking this morning about studying some in theology about God being almighty, and he's come across an example that he'll have reinforced now the rest of his life. If God's all-powerful, then can he make a stone greater than himself, one that he can't lift? You hear that all the time in theology. I don't know if that's the first time he saw that, but if it is, he'll see it time and time and time again. All it takes is getting introduced to these things, and you'll start having it reinforced from now on. Reinforced from now on. If God can do everything, well, could he tell a lie? Could he commit a moral sin? I mean, the list will go on, but the picking up of a rock, can he make a rock too big for him to pick up, is a famous example. Came from back in the Middle Ages. When what? People got together and thought about it. All right, if you say God's all-powerful, could he make a rock too big for him to pick up? Hey, that's a good question. What would your answer be to that then? Oh, that's an easy way out. It's beyond our reasoning. Could he make a rock if he's all-powerful? I don't know if he's come across a good explanation of all that, but there are ways to explain that. But you got to think, though. You'd hate to say yes or no, because you see the conclusions of both of those answers. And that's what's wise right away. You don't want to say no, but you don't want to say yes either. You see, that's going to lead me down a certain alley. I don't know if I can get out of that alley once I say yes or no. So people start hedging right away, or throw up their hand and say that's beyond reason. I'm not saying it's totally within reason, but I'm saying that, and I'm sure he's taking this in the proper sense. I'm not criticizing him. That is the way a lot of people get out of it. Oh, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his ways and my... By the way, taking that from Isaiah 55 is out of context. what Isaiah is saying, he's not saying that our thoughts are low compared to God's high thoughts and we can't approach his high thoughts. That's a good verse to bring in right now, though, because if that's what he's saying, we just soon give up thinking theology. We could never think theology. God just says, your thoughts are not mine. That's not what he's saying. That's been taken out of context. A famous verse taken out of context. And what it's been used to explain is how, high God is and how low we are. We can never reach him with our thoughts or our ways, and ours are different than God. That's not right. He expects us to have the same thoughts and ways that he has. He expects our thoughts to be like his thoughts. Isaiah was saying something entirely different there. So there's so many verses. I could just pass out right now. It's such on my shoulder. The spectrum is so broad. It's so incredibly broad. That's why we're having to go through so many different classes, and it takes us so long to get through all of them. The spectrum is just immense. It's almost as though there are no horizons. There's no east or west horizon when it comes to theological and philosophical dialogue. It just goes on and on and on. But I have to think that that's what it's all about. That's what heaven's going to be all about. Of thinking and talking about, and what else will there be to do? Thinking of the past. We'll be in the future, I guess. We'll be thinking about that. But about God. I'm sure we'll never know in this life what we'll know in that life, and I'm sure we'll never know in that life everything there is to know. There's a subject that has been philosophized about and sat and thought about by many people for hundreds of years, the subject of eternity. I don't think we've ever given enough weight to that. Choose a topic and start thinking about what is it going to be like forever and ever and ever and ever. Just as I say that, you just have the strangest feelings come in you, because we're not creatures of foreverness like that. Forever and ever, no end. There'll be no creation after that. Of no end. Of no end. It's an awesome thought. Just an awesome thought. And it will affect the way that you live your life. It'll be one of the chief things we're going to say with secularism later on. The origin of the Latin term there. Of what we think about eternity. Now, what people would like to call us is radical. Well, you people are radical. We believe some of the same things, but we're not as radical. I think that's a name used by weasels to imply that there are different levels of commitment that are allowed of God, all more or less equal. I'd like to diagram it something like this for you. I mean, surely we've used the term as we use it, as we understand it. But surely we would be called fanatics, radicals. What they mean by that is there is this line of doing or believing. This line right here in the center represents the break between, let's say, serving Satan and serving God. So over here you've got Satan. And over here you've got God. Within this line, or on this line of doing or believing according to God, we have different levels of that. We've got some people here, and some here, and some here, and then we've got people that are radical, that are way down there. And the same could be said serving Satan. But then if I erase this, do it again, a lot of people won't receive this at all. But the line may look something like that. This is Satan. And there's doing and believing according to what God says. I think radical is just used by weasels who don't want to commit themselves. And so what they try to say is, well, there are different levels of this. I don't know so much that there are really different levels to commitment whenever you get to the final basic ingredient of everything. You either have chosen to follow and believe or you've chosen not to. Or you say, what about the person who hasn't chosen one way or the other? All right, maybe they're not this far down here with the devil. They haven't actually chosen to serve Satan. But if you're not for God, if you haven't chosen this way, you're somewhere along this line. Somewhere just in the land of serving Satan nonetheless. That may be a little hyper of an illustration, but I still find it rather helpful. That I think radical is a name invented by weasels who want to imply to us that there are different levels of commitment allowed, all more or less the same, and it's just that some people choose to go a little further, and that doesn't necessarily make them more pleasing to God. I think by calling people like ourselves radical or fanatical, I think those terms also carry connotations of unbalanced, immaturely zealous, prematurely quick in their beliefs as well. I think those terms carry very unfavorable connotations. Radical. We use the term radical sometimes if we're comparing ourselves to other people who just seem to be playing around and playing games. But then don't we on other occasions say all that we're living here is the normal Christian life? It's just the ordinary Christian life. We're using that, you see, to emphasize this. It's just the ordinary. There's not any other way to live the Christian life but just the regular way. And that's what we're doing. Because I always say this, we're not doing anything beyond the call of duty. Name something that we're doing that's meritorious. That means it's beyond what God has called us to do. We're not doing it. We haven't found anything yet. I can't think of anything that would be beyond what He calls us to do. That means we're only doing the obvious, the simple, the regular. That means we're living the normal Christian life. That means the people aren't living this, they're not living the Christian life. They may have some emotional attachment to religion or to Christianity, but I'm not convinced they're living the Christian life. So if we're talking about us being radical, then it'd be in this connection here, radical with people who just barely cross over the line. But I oftentimes have said some statement along this line that all we're doing is living the normal, regular Christian life. Nothing spectacular, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would approach the angelic. It's just a regular, normal Christian life. You just believe God, you love God, you follow God, you do the commandments of God. I can't think of anything greater than what He said to do that we're doing. And I can't think of anything greater than what we're doing that He said to do. Because it's all summed up. Love God. Love your neighbor. Keep the commandments of God. Fear Him. This is the whole duty of man. If that's the whole duty and you're doing your best to do that, that must mean that there's nothing beyond. And that must mean that is the whole duty. And you're not doing that, you're not doing your duty. Well, in Matthew 10:16 and Romans 16:19, Jesus encourages us to be wise as serpents and harmless or as innocent as a dove. Matthew 10:16, Romans 16:17. I think I'll stop with that. I think I've gone long enough this morning. Be as wise as a serpent. That's an unusual metaphor because serpent almost always is used as a reference to Satan in Scripture. So it's rather shocking to find serpent on the lips of Jesus when He's talking about you and I. That is surprising. Be as wise as a snake. As harmless as a dove, as innocent as a dove. Simple, if the King James says simple, the Greek doesn't mean, simple in the sense of ignorant, or that'd contradict being wise. But be harmless, innocent. You don't cause offense to someone else, but be as wise as a snake. We would probably today say wise as an owl. But I don't know that even owls are wise anymore. They've lived too much around Americans. I'm sure they've lost some of their proverbial legendary wisdom.